Hello, my name is Arnie Herz, and I am your host for Habits of a Whole Heart. This is part of the Humanity Matters series on hmTv, which is a series of podcasts that really try to bring light and upliftment to humanity. You could follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and all the major outlets. I'm now here for part 2 of this phenomenal conversation with Wendy Shulman, who is the owner of the Roslyn Salt Cave. In episode number 1, we talked about Wendy's own personal journey from a very serious car accident and how she went and traveled the world to really understand what healing really means and to understand which healing modalities are most effective. And she had a dream from 30 years ago to create the Salt Cave, a healing place, a spa, which she has now created in Roslyn and is very successful. And I myself have been there, and that's how I got to know about Wendy. So we're now going to delve into part 2. Wendy, in part 1, you said a number of things that really jumped out at me, and I want to sort of come back and put a little more explanation on them. One, you said that the car accident, when I mentioned to you this was unfortunate, and you said, no, it was a gift, and that nothing happens by accident, no pun intended, and that everything is meant to teach us something. So that one of being able to take what most people would consider to be a tragedy and turn it into a growth experience is very, very extraordinary. And it's what we try to talk about in Habits of a Whole Heart. Connected to that, you said that we all have a soul contract. We all come here for a purpose with a reason, and we forget what that is. So part of what we're searching is to reconnect with that soul journey. And so the accident was actually a redirect to help you find what your real soul journey was, which was, as you said, having this vision of the Salt Cave. And then you talked about dreams and how dreams shape our thoughts, which shape our reality. And I think about the importance of, we need to have bigger dreams. And I think that's interesting that you're here. Today is January 22nd or 23rd. 20th to 23rd. And we just celebrated MLK Day, Martin Luther King's birthday. And of course, he was famous for his dream. I have a dream, and he had these incredible dreams to reshape society. So I'm thinking about all of this together during this week. So I'll give you a chance to absorb that and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I love how you tied it into that. So yes, I feel so lucky that I got this vision of this wellness center, and then that somehow I got the courage to go after it. You know, I literally for 30 years, I walked around this place in my head. And I knew what it would look like. I knew it would have an African chic kind of a vibe. And it was almost a formality to open it up because I had already seen what it would look like. And then I remember reading something that when they opened Disneyland, and Walt Disney's brother was being interviewed by a reporter, and the reporter said to him, "Isn't it a shame that he died before he could see this?" And he said, he saw it before you did. And so I feel so lucky that I had this vision and I went after it. And the way that the universe has helped me so much, I've never advertised. People just walk in off the street and they say, "Are you looking for a massage therapist?" Or "Do you want to add this modality or that modality?" And I'm like, "Yes, thank you, universe." And then I use that. I often use that if I need something, I want to bring in something new. I'll have a conversation with the universe, or I'll start manifesting it. So I teach manifestation, and I look at all different ways that I can, tap in and create new things. And I feel like there's this amazing quantum field out there, and that we can literally step into it and, choose certain things that are in alignment with who we are and what our soul purpose is. And I see it every day working.
So you're pointing to something really profound, right? We think we understand ourselves, but we really don't. I'm writing a book called Habits of a Whole Heart, and there's a section in there based on another book that I read, which is called Stranger to Ourselves, and how little we really understand what makes us tick and what makes us operate. And what you're really talking about is what brilliant minds, and whether it's in the field of science or art or music or religion, understand that the mind is so much more vast, and that what we're capable of, you're saying manifesting, creating, and tapping into these deeper abilities that we have. Most people are living very constrained lives. And and that's just because we don't realize it. There's an old metaphor of when you train an elephant, a baby elephant, you put a string around its leg and you tie it to the post, and the elephant learns that it can't go anywhere. And then once the elephant gets a little bit bigger, you just unattach the string. The string's still on the elephant's leg, but it's not attached to anything. But the elephant has been trained to think it can't go anywhere. But the elephant's free. And I think we're like that same thing. And there's so much more mental capacity. Einstein said we use, 2% of our brains. So when you're manifesting, when you're connecting to your deeper self through meditation or whatever it may be, your mental capacity becomes much greater.
I feel like you touched on something so good by what you said. It's our belief systems and what's sometimes being ingrained in us by people of authority or people that we trust or believe, or our own self-limiting beliefs. But there's such practical ways that you can change that. So when I'm driving in the car, I don't listen to music. I listen to podcasts, and it's free, or not even podcasts, sometimes just YouTube, like Jim Rohn or some of like the great leaders. And they talk about Bob Proctor, and they talk about mindset and how your thoughts control your reality, can change your whole life. And the interesting thing, the theme that I see is it's very simple, tangible habits. And one of them is, what is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Before you get on your phone, what is the first thing that you do? Like, to create some kind of a morning habit that is kind of a blueprint for your day. So no matter what happens the rest of the day, you've already maybe meditated or done some kind of a gratitude practice, because the more you're grateful for, the gratitude is a synchronizer with the universe, the more the universe gives you to be grateful for. And then you start paying attention to that in your life, and that expands your mind. And then also a nighttime ritual before you go to sleep I don't care if people scroll before they go to sleep or what they do, but the last thing before you go to sleep, which I do every night, is I think about something good that happened during the day, and I also bring in protection for the people that I love. Like, I picture us in this golden light, and I bring in all the archangels. And so what that does is it programs your mind for the next 6, 7, 8 hours, however many hours you sleep, into a more positive thoughts. Like, your consciousness is thinking of positive things, as opposed to going to bed and thinking about a fight you had or something negative or whatever's going on in the news. And then that's programming your thoughts. Those little steps, like those 3 things, the morning ritual, the gratitude, and the nighttime ritual, will change your life. And they're simple. And then, of course, the driving in the car and learning from people who have changed their lives. I mean, there's so many stories of people who have had such difficult upbringings, and they have completely transformed their lives, and they're either millionaires or they've impacted so many people. And
think about Nelson Mandela. You're from South Africa. Spent 27 years of the prime of his life
in jail,
in a prison, in a brutal condition. And yet he became one of the greatest leaders in history.
Exactly.
Extraordinary. So, the podcast is called Habits of a Whole Heart.
Exactly.
And so in order to create a whole heart, it seems very spiritual and mystical, but it's all about habits. And this is exactly what you're talking about. In Judaism, which I implement this habit, in the morning, first thing you do in the morning is this, what's called the Moda'ani, where you thank God for restoring your soul. We take for granted that we wake up. But you thank God, thank you for restoring my soul, and you say that the only reason you restored my soul is because you have faith in me, that I'm here for a purpose, and that you need me to conduct that purpose. If you didn't need me, I wouldn't wake up. I'm only here for a purpose, and that's the Moda'ani prayer. It's really beautiful. It's the first sign of consciousness, and it says, wow, I'm so grateful to be alive. This life is so sacred, and I'm here for a purpose. And this has had much deeper meaning for me, given my own life journey, which
I want to ask you about that, because you have got your own healing story. Can you tell me a little bit about that? I want to know more.
Yeah, so for our listeners, we just met a couple weeks ago through Mo Wolf, who was my Pilates instructor, who is the owner of the Evolution Pilates studio. And so through Mo, that's how we got to meet. And then Wendy and I started talking. And so Wendy, as many of my listeners know, when I was 20 years old, I had congestive heart failure playing a basketball game at the University of Michigan. And when it happened, it was the first time in my life that I had that intuitive feeling that you were talking about. I'm sitting in the hospital and the doctors told me, and this voice came up within me saying, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to you in your life, because it's going to enable you to take control of your life and live life the way you need to live it, not based on what everyone expects of you. And I was very surprised by that. Make a long story short, I started getting involved in yoga and meditation. And a year later, I bought a one-way ticket to Europe. And I traveled 2 months in Europe, 2 months in Australia, and I ended up in India in an ashram. And I stayed involved with that ashram for almost 20 years. And I lived in India for approximately 4 years. Wow. And it was an incredible experience. And through the process of meditation, I learned how to change my whole biodynamics, and a surgery that I was supposed to have to replace the heart valve. Within 3 years, I was able to delay for 33 years. And it was very transformative for me. And I had such a deeper understanding of myself and a lot of the topics that we're talking about here. 33 years later, which was actually 10 years ago, in 2016, I started feeling fatigued. And my cardiologist told me that my heart had enlarged by 50%. The heart valve, my aortic heart valve, was not really working, and that I needed to have surgery. Otherwise, I would have about a year to live. So it was a real wake-up call. And I had 6 weeks to prepare. And I was in fairly decent shape, but that's when I started doing Pilates to develop my core strength, because after you have major open heart surgery, you can't use your arms. And I was very, very fortunate that I had this incredible procedure called the Ross procedure, where they took my tricuspid valve and turned it into an aortic valve. My aortic valve, which wasn't working, got rid of. Then I got a human donated valve to go into my tricuspid position. I got a new aortic root, artificial, and I got a nip and tuck of my aorta that brought my heart dimensions back to the way it was when I was 25 years old. And so it was really quite extraordinary.
That's phenomenal.
And then everything was great. And 3.5 years ago, I was sitting in my backyard. No one really knows exactly what caused it, but I had all of a sudden a massive headache, and a headache like I've never had before. And I remember from American history, because I always studied history, FDR's final words were, I have a terrible pain in the back of my head. And then he collapsed, and an hour later he died from a cerebral hemorrhage. And I thought, am I having a FDR moment? I never called 911 for myself. So I called 911. I said, I'm going to leave my front door open. I'm going to lie down on my couch. So they came in. I was having a cerebral hemorrhage. I was having what's called a subarachnoid hemorrhage that was bleeding in multiple spots in the deepest part of the brain, which they virtually could do nothing about. So they didn't know if that was compressed jugular veins because of the open heart surgery a number of years earlier, what it may have been. But the chance of getting to the hospital alive was 50-50. Got to the hospital alive. They told my wife the next day that there was only a 50% chance I'd make it through the weekend. And I was conscious and aware. I heard what they were saying.
Wow.
So this is Wednesday, August 10th, 2022. And I was just stunned. We were supposed to go on this beautiful trip to Italy the following week. And life just stopped. And I've thought about my death multiple times. I had that major open heart surgery. So this wasn't unique for me. And I just all of a sudden felt this incredible gratitude for the life that I had lived. It was incredible. It was so unexpected. I never felt bad for myself. I was in a lot of pain, but I never felt bad for myself. And I said, if this is it, I'm incredibly grateful for this life that I've lived. And how am I going to make the next 3 days the most meaningful and impactful? Wow. And I also prayed to God that I want to be here for my kids' weddings, see my grandkids.
Yeah.
Very emotional. And if it's meant to be, I would love to continue living. I accept if I can't, but I love to continue living. And if I continue living, I promised that every day I will give 100% of myself to bring light into this world. And that was my commitment. So they also told Suzanne, okay, that 50% will make it through the weekend. And then it was still very risky for the following 2 weeks. And then if I was able to get out of there, there was a high likelihood I would have mental or physical or speech impairment. And miraculously, 2 weeks later, I walked out 100%. I was really worn down. I'd lost 20 pounds. I hadn't been able to move. I was basically unable to, I was only able to walk 15 minutes a day because they didn't want to shake the system. So it said it would take months to recuperate. But I was grateful to be alive, incredibly grateful. And it was an extraordinary experience. And it was 4 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, and we are Shomer Shabbat. And our shul is 2 miles from our home, and it's hilly. It's a very difficult walk. There was just no way I was going to have the strength or the ability to get to shul for Rosh Hashanah. Yeah. So I was told. But I'm a competitive guy, and I'm pretty determined. And I don't know what it was, but my wife found out through someone in the circle about the Roslyn Salt Cave. So you didn't even realize, but within the next day, I was at the Roslyn Salt Cave and sitting in there. And I had all these anesthesias, everything. I had multiple procedures on my brain. And I guess I started detoxing. And we went multiple sessions to the Salt Cave for sitting in the Salt Cave. We had a massage in the Salt Cave. I don't know if you still do that, but we did that. And there's a bunch of different things that we did. And it was one of my healing things I was able to do because physically I wasn't able to do that much. And then I started, rehabbing and doing everything I had to do. And 4 weeks later was Rosh Hashanah. And we walked to shul, 2 miles there and 2 miles back. And the healing process took about 3 months. And by then I was 100%. And now this podcast and the book is an outgrowth of that experience of wanting to give 100%, the deepest, to let people connect to the sacredness of their lives that they take for granted, that I took for granted, to understand how fortunate we are and that we're here for a purpose and to bring upliftment to other people.
Wow, what an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for asking.
But you didn't. So I believe that we have certain exit points in our lives that we get to choose. Am I leaving now? Or do I want to renegotiate? Or do I still, is my destiny, my legacy unfinished? And you clearly had things to do. I don't know if other people would have survived. For so many reasons you did.
Well, I think, first and foremost, I think what happens is we have a certain life purpose. Yeah. Right? I saw this when I was 20. When I was 20 years old, I went to India for the first time. And remember that voice I heard in the emergency room, in the cardiologist's office was, this is the voice I heard was, this is the greatest thing that happened to you in your life. If you don't take control of your life, you'll be dead within 3 years. Yeah. I remember those words. It was very strange. So fast forward, 4 years later, there was this famous palm reader that came to the ashram where I was living in rural India. And his palm reader read my palm and looks with a shock and said, this is 4 years after the incident. She says, based on your palm, you were supposed to die a year ago. And I feel like by taking control of my life, I bought a new destiny for myself. Yeah. And then the next phase was the heart surgery, which was risky, but particularly the brain bleed. And that's why I said, I will give 100%. It was like a new mission, a new destiny, a new experience of self. So yeah, that's why I felt the gratitude and the love. I feel like that phase of my life was complete and I felt whole and grateful. Just like you say at the end of the day at night, they say sleep is 1/60th of death, according to Talmud. So we say, okay, the day is complete. We have to consider the day complete. And we're grateful for what the day was and what everything was up to that point in time. Then we have a new day with a new mission and a new purpose.
Yeah.
So that's...
Wow, you are the right person to be interviewing people and writing your book and sharing your story. And also, the thing is that you stuck to your agreement. You know, so many people in times of fear and stress and being faced with death will make an agreement and say, I promise you, I will do this, 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 and this. And then when they're feeling better, they don't do it. But clearly, you embody that. You live your life that way. So well done.
Thank you. And I think that embedded within that is how does that happen? Like, why is this a reality for me and not a reality for other people who have had near-death experiences? And it comes down to what you were saying. It's habits. It's habits. What's the difference between, one thing that I've studied habits a lot. And habits, first of all, willpower is greatly overstated.
Yeah, it's an emotion.
Willpower is greatly overstated. People say, I have the will and I have determination. No.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You are not going to, it's not going to succeed with willpower. No. You need to have a habit. And the habit is automated. You're not even thinking about it. You bring it from the slow brain to the fast brain. Yeah. And so these are habits. So waking up in the morning to say the Moda'ani prayer or giving thanks or focusing and creating an intention is a habit. At night, when Suzanne and I go to sleep, before we go to sleep, 3 things you're grateful for. And you could do 9 things you're grateful for. Yeah. And then you start thinking about things and you realize like, wow. And almost always we'll do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 things that we're grateful for. And it's amazing. And you could probably do 100 things that you're grateful for.
Yeah.
So this becomes a habit. Mm-hmm. You can't go to sleep without doing this. And when you think about religion, whatever religion, whether it's Eastern philosophy or it's Judaism or Christianity, or Islam, there's Buddhism, there's flows of a day. There's a daily discipline. When are you going to pray? What's your intention with the prayer? Those are reminders of bringing me back to my core self. That the slowdown that we talked about earlier, that natural godly self that exists within us, to allow it to permeate and come forth in some ways, and that's has to become habitual, and that's the key thing.
Exactly. And the cost of not doing it is so high.
So now the question becomes, how do you implement these habits? Habits could take, they say, weeks to create.
Baby steps. Like I would say, to wake up in the morning and I literally have a book, a little journal that I hand to people that has 10 spots on it to write down the 10 things you're grateful for. And I explain to them it could be easy. I'm grateful for that delicious food I ate yesterday. I'm grateful for the grass beneath my feet. I'm grateful for that bird that just flew by. And you start very simply. It's just 10 things every morning. You create very small little habits that accumulate on each other. And you're not going to see a difference, in one day, in 3 days, in 3 months, in a year. But maybe, let's say 2 random people start at the same time. One person doesn't do any of these habits and lives his life as he's living today, and the other one starts these little habits every day. If you look at these people in 5 years' time, the person who has done nothing and lived his life the same way will be in the same place. Maybe worse, because we're never staying the same. We're either getting better or we're getting worse. And the person who's created these daily habits, the gratitude, the sleep rituals, just setting like some more of a foundation in their life, will have a completely different life because the fiber of their life has changed.
Real quickly, because we only have another minute to go. I love that. What is it about gratitude you think that works?
It's a synchronizer with the universe. And then you start focusing on gratitude instead of fear and instead of negativity, and it gains momentum, and then more things start coming for you to be grateful for. When you live in a state of gratitude, you're grateful for even the negative things that happen because you understand the lesson and the opportunity for the lesson. And
it goes back to what you said in the first episode. Things don't happen to you, they happen for you. And that's a very empowering way. And it goes back to the very, very beginning of the first episode where people are very stressed right now because they feel like the world is out of their control. And when you thinking about gratitude, how much we have, and realize the great gratitude to be able to help other people, to step outside of ourselves is an incredibly fulfilling experience. And that gives us agency. That's what we have control over. We can control what's within our world, what's in our mind, what's in our feelings, and what's in our actions. That's what we control. That's our agency. And that's what people need back, is their agency. And there are things that we can't control.
Right.
But what we need to focus on is what we can control. And there is where we make the great impact.
I love it. Exactly.
Wendy, thank you so much for being on this podcast, for being my guest for these 2 incredible episodes. I'd love to have you back in a few months, and we'll see how much you've grown. We want to see how we've grown and the habits and how things come into play. And I'm looking forward to a visit very soon to the Roslyn Salt Cave, because I was telling you I have a little bit of a respiratory thing, and you're reminding me I need this toothbrush for the lungs, for the Salt Cave. So to our listeners, thank you again for listening and for being part of this series. Your support is what makes this worth doing, and I really, really appreciate it. And I want to thank you again for tuning in to Habits of a Whole Heart. This is episode number 2 with Wendy Shulman, the owner of the Roslyn Salt Cave, which has been a very uplifting, meaningful, and healing session. So wishing you all a great day. This again is part of the Humanity Matters series on hmTV. Please follow us and be well. Thank you.